This presentation is titled The Vikings from a Historical and Scientific Viewpoint. Join me as we embark on a fascinating journey into the world of the Vikings, arguably one of the most intriguing and misunderstood cultures in history. Known for their seafaring prowess, daring raids, and exploration of distant lands, the Vikings were much more than the fierce warriors often depicted in popular culture. In this presentation, we'll uncover the layers of Viking life, delving into their traditions, beliefs, and societal structures. We'll explore how these Norse adventurers not only shaped the regions they encountered, but also left a legacy of innovation, trade, and storytelling that still resonates today. From their legendary longships to their complex mythology, the Vikings offer us a window into a dynamic and interconnected medieval world. Before we start, let's have a little humor. Hey guys, let's start a band. We can call ourselves the Pillage People. Shut up, Bjorn. The term Viking is believed to derive from the Old Norse word vikingur, which refers to a person who participates in a Viking, a word used to describe a sea expedition or raid. Essentially, the name suggests someone who goes adventuring, raiding, or exploring by sea. Interestingly, not all Norse people were Vikings in the sense of being raiders or explorers. The term specifically applied to those who set out on these maritime ventures, whether for trading, raiding, or colonization. Over time, the word Viking has come to broadly represent the Norse culture as a whole, but its origins are tied to a particular activity. Quite fitting for a people renowned for their seafaring spirit, don't you think? The Vikings originated from Scandinavia, which includes the modern-day countries of Denmark, Norway, and Sweden. These seafaring Norsemen began their ventures around the late 8th century, leaving their homelands to raid, trade, and settle across Europe and beyond. Their influence extended as far as the Mediterranean, North Africa, the Middle East, and even North America. Vikings from 3 different countries went 3 different ways. From Norway they traveled west. From Sweden they traveled east, and the Danish Vikings traveled to the south. The Norman Vikings were Norse settlers who established themselves in what is now Normandy, France, during the early 10th century. Their name, Norman, comes from Northmen, reflecting their Scandinavian origins. These Vikings, led by figures like Rollo, initially raided the northern coasts of France, but eventually settled there after the Treaty of Saint-Clair-sur-Epte in 911. This agreement granted them land in exchange for their loyalty to the Frankish king. Over time, the Normans adopted the local language, culture, and Christianity, blending their Norse heritage with Frankish traditions. This unique fusion gave rise to a distinct Norman identity. The Normans became renowned for their military prowess, particularly their cavalry and their adventurous spirit. They played a significant role in European history, most famously with the Norman conquest of England in 1066 under William the Conqueror. Their influence extended beyond France and England, as they also ventured into southern Italy, Sicily, and even the Crusades. The Normans left a lasting legacy, shaping the political and cultural landscapes of the regions they touched. Fascinating, isn't it? On a lighter note, there are some that believe the Vikings have ventured beyond Earth. Viking longships were remarkable feats of shipbuilding, central to the Vikings' ability to explore, trade, and raid across vast distances. The versatility of longships that were designed for both sailing and rowing, allowing them to navigate various waters, including open seas, rivers, and shallow coastal areas. This adaptability was crucial for their voyages, enabling them to travel deep inland via rivers and to cross oceans. By design and construction, they were long, narrow, and light, making them exceptionally fast and maneuverable. Their shallow draft allowed them to be easily beached, which was vital for quick landings and raids. They were typically constructed from overlapping wooden planks, clinker construction, which provided strength and flexibility. Continuing with our discussion about Viking ships, there were various types of longships, each designed for specific purposes. Some were built primarily for warfare, while others were used for trade and exploration. Drakars, meaning dragon ships, were among the most famous, often featuring ornate carvings, especially dragon heads at the bow, intended to intimidate enemies. Longships played a pivotal role in the Viking Age, facilitating their expansion and influence across Europe and beyond. Their design and construction demonstrated advanced shipbuilding skills and contributed to the Vikings' reputation as formidable seafarers. In essence, the Viking longship was a technological marvel of its time, enabling the Vikings to achieve remarkable feats of navigation and conquest. Pictured here is the Viking ship Oseberg, built in the year 820, discovered in Norway in 1903 and now at Oslo Museum. The ship was discovered in a large burial mound at the Oseberg farm near Tønsberg, Norway. The Gokstad ship is a 9th century Viking ship found in a burial mound at Gokstad in Sandar, Norway. The ship was used as a burial vessel for a high-ranking Viking, likely a chieftain or king. The skeletal remains of a man were found on board, along with grave goods like weapons, tools, and domestic items. Lead isotope analysis of 37 Viking pewter brooches, in combination with traditional archaeological interpretations, provides new information on the use of raw materials. Objects of lead, tin, and their alloy, pewter, have recently been acknowledged as a feature of the material culture of Viking period Scandinavia. It does, however, raise the question as to where these metals originated, as neither lead or tin were found in Scandinavia at that time. The Bayeux tapestry is an embroidered cloth nearly 70 meters long and 50 centimeters tall that depicts the events leading up to the Norman conquest of England in 1066. It's a remarkable historical artifact that offers a unique glimpse into the past. Within its intricate embroidery, depictions of ships play a significant role, offering insights into the maritime technology of the time. The ships portrayed in the tapestry clearly reflect the strong influence of Viking shipbuilding traditions. This is understandable given the Normans' Viking heritage. It's important to remember that the Bayeux tapestry is an artistic representation, not a precise technical drawing. Therefore, the ships are stylized. Let's turn to another question. Where did the Vikings get the oak for their ships? And how did the Vikings find iron ore in order to make weapons and to make nails to build their ships? The oak tree is the king of the forest and was used to build Viking ships. Southern Scandinavia, particularly Denmark and southern Norway and Sweden, was a primary source of oak. These regions had ample oak forests. However, even in areas where pine was more prevalent, oak was often preferred for key structural components like the keel. This meant that oak was sometimes transported. Evidence suggests that the Vikings also sourced oak from other regions, including the British Isles. For example, analysis of some Viking ship remains has revealed the use of Irish oak. This highlights the Vikings' ability to travel and trade, allowing them to access resources beyond their immediate surroundings. Bog iron is a form of impure iron deposit that develops in bogs or swamps by the chemical or biochemical oxidation of iron carried in solution. The Vikings were skilled blacksmiths and made extensive use of bog iron to craft tools, weapons, and other metal objects. They likely discovered bog iron deposits while exploring new territories and quickly learned how to extract and process it. In general, bog ores consist primarily of iron, commonly goethite, iron oxide. Streams carry dissolved iron from nearby mountains. In the bog, the iron is concentrated by two processes. The bog environment is acidic, with a low concentration of dissolved oxygen. In the acidic environment of the bog, a chemical reaction forms insoluble iron compounds which precipitate out. But more importantly, anaerobic bacteria growing under the surface of the bog concentrate the iron as part of their life processes. Their presence can be detected on the surface by the iridescent oily film they leave on the water, another sure sign of bog iron. The irony, excuse the pun, is that the largest and richest iron ore deposits in the world are now found in northern Sweden in Lapland, the Kiruna iron ore deposits. Neighboring Finland did not start mining until 1350. We have to ask, how did the Vikings navigate such long distances? Well, the Vikings were remarkable seafarers, and their ability to navigate long distances across open ocean was crucial to their explorations and raids. They employed a combination of techniques rather than relying on a single method. Vikings relied on birds, whales, celestial bodies, chants, and rhymes to navigate the seas and discover new land. When closer to land, they relied on visible landmarks such as distinctive mountains, coastlines, and islands. They created mental maps and passed down knowledge of routes through oral tradition. They observed the flight patterns of birds, particularly seabirds, to indicate proximity to land. They could also detect the presence of land by the presence of certain marine animals. Since it is the land of the midnight sun, they had to navigate without the stars during these times of the year. They had to use the sun for navigational purposes. They also used a sunstone to navigate on cloudy days. The sunstone is a fascinating topic related to Viking navigation, and it centers around the idea that Vikings may have used certain crystals to determine the sun's position, even in overcast conditions. The idea revolves around certain crystals, particularly Iceland spar optical calcite, which have the property of polarizing light. This property allows them to reveal the direction of the sun, even when it's obscured by clouds or fog. Iceland spar is a transparent calcite mineral that splits light into two beams, a phenomenon called birefringence. Scientists have demonstrated that by using Iceland spar, it's possible to determine the sun's position with reasonable accuracy. Scientific experiments have shown that Iceland spar can indeed be used to find the sun's position, but whether Vikings actually used it is still a subject of ongoing research. The Alderney, an Elizabethan warship that sunk in 1592 close to the British Channel Islands off the French coast. In 2013, scientists at the University of Rennes in France discovered an unusual calcite crystal among the navigational tools. While the sinking took place 3 centuries after the Vikings, the discovery nonetheless suggests that sunstones may have been widely used by seamen of old in order to help them navigate. The term Leidarstein, sometimes anglicized as Leidarstein, is an Old Norse word that translates to waystone or lodestone. It's primarily associated with the idea of a navigational tool used by Vikings, and it's closely tied to the sunstone concept. Magnetite is found in bog ore deposits. Vikings, as well as the Chinese, may have discovered its magnetic properties for a magnetic compass. Magnetite is also known as lodestone. There are many known magnetite deposits in both Norway and Sweden. It's important to note that lodestone itself is a naturally magnetized mineral, while the sunstone theory focuses on Iceland's spar and its light polarizing properties. There's also the possibility that Vikings had some understanding of magnetic compasses. It is possible that the term Leidarstein could have been used to refer to lodestone, and that the Vikings had some knowledge of magnetic direction finding. Viking sun compass Sol Skugja Fjöl, or sun shadow board, considered to be a crude sextant to determine latitude when used in conjunction with sunstones. It was found in Unatok, Greenland, at a Norse settlement in 1948. It features notches and markings that suggest it was used to track the sun's position and determine direction. Similar to a sundial, the device would have used a vertical pin to cast a shadow. Let's briefly mention some additional navigational devices and aids. The North Star or Polar Star was understood as well as knowledge of tidal information. Soundings for depth using a heavy lead weight attached to a line, shallow depths nearing land. Attach wax to the weight in order to sample the seabed for the color and nature of the sand or mud. Geological test of experienced seaman's landmark. Landnámabók, Icelandic Book of Settlements, notes that the presence of birds and whales marks the southern edge of Iceland. King's Mirror, Norwegian educational text of 1250, was the passing of nautical wisdom from father to son. As far as we know, Vikings didn't wear horned helmets. Norsemen probably sported headgear, but that whole horn-festooned helmet look was probably started by Wagner's Ride of the Valkyries. Depictions dating from the Viking age don't show it, and the only authentic Viking helmet ever discovered is decidedly horn-free. Between rowing boats and decapitating enemies, Viking men must have stunk to high Valhalla, right? Quite the opposite. Excavations of Viking sites have turned up tweezers, razors, combs, and ear cleaners made from animal bones and antlers. It is reported that Vikings also bathed at least once a week, much more frequently than other Europeans of their day, and also enjoyed dips in natural hot springs. Clean freaks though they were reported to be, the Vikings had no qualms about harnessing the power of one human waste product. They would collect a fungus called Fomes fomentarius, often known as touchwood, from tree bark and boil it for several days in urine before pounding it into something akin to felt. The sodium nitrate found in urine would allow the material to smolder rather than burn, so Vikings could take fire with them on the go. The Iceland Viking sagas reveal a male cult of personal valor and violent military bravery, and the opportunity to demonstrate that it was a kind of competitive sport. It's important to understand that our knowledge of Viking women comes from a combination of archaeological findings, Norse sagas, and historical accounts, which can sometimes be subject to interpretation. Viking women played crucial roles in their society, often holding significant responsibilities. They were primarily responsible for managing households and farms, especially when their husbands were away on voyages. They were involved in textile production, which was a vital industry, and some women engaged in trade and commerce. Compared to women in other contemporary societies, Viking women had relatively more legal rights. They could own property, request divorces, and reclaim their dowries. The concept of shield maidens, women warriors, is a subject of ongoing debate. While sagas and myths feature female warriors like Lagertha, archaeological evidence has also provided some support for the idea that women participated in combat. However, it's generally accepted that the majority of Viking women were not warriors. Women also held spiritual roles as priestesses and vulvas, seeresses, who were highly respected for their knowledge of the supernatural. Their daily lives involved a great deal of hard work, including farming, cooking, and crafting. They were skilled craftswomen, particularly in weaving and textile production. In essence, Viking women were far from passive figures. They were active participants in their society, contributing to its economic, social, and cultural fabric. To conform to their culture's beauty ideals, brunette Vikings, usually men, would use a strong soap with a high lye content to bleach their hair. In some regions, beards were lightened as well. It's likely these treatments also helped Vikings with a problem far more prickly and rampant than mousy manes, head lice. Why did the Vikings become so battle-ready in late 8th century? Some Scandinavian scholars point to a historic event that may have gotten the Vikings on an aggressive footing, namely the massacre of 4,500 Saxons in the year 782, committed on the orders of Charlemagne. The massacre of Verden was a significant and brutal event that occurred during the Saxon Wars, a series of conflicts between the Frankish king Charlemagne and the Saxons. The Saxon Wars were a long and drawn-out conflict lasting over 30 years as Charlemagne sought to conquer Saxony and convert its people to Christianity. The Saxons, who adhered to Germanic paganism, fiercely resisted Frankish rule and the imposition of Christianity. In October 782, near Verden, in what is now Lower Saxony, Germany, Charlemagne ordered the execution of thousands of Saxons. Historical accounts, notably the Royal Frankish Annals, report that 4,500 Saxons were beheaded. The massacre of Verden remains a dark and controversial chapter in European history, highlighting the brutality of the era and the complexities of historical interpretation. Western raiders from Norway and Denmark attacked Great Britain and Ireland first. The red areas on the map indicate Norse Vikings, whilst the yellow depicts Danish Vikings. The Viking expeditions and raids all started with the sacking of Lindisfarne Island Monastery, located in Northumbria, on June 8th in the year 793. It is considered to be a pivotal moment that marks the beginning of the Viking Age in many historical accounts. Lindisfarne was a wealthy monastery, a center of religious importance, and therefore held valuable treasures. Monasteries in general were relatively undefended, making them easy targets for raiders. The Vikings were skilled seafarers, and their longships allowed them to conduct swift and surprise attacks. Lindisfarne's location on an island made it accessible by sea, facilitating a rapid raid. It is thought that changing dynamics in Scandinavia may have led to an increase in people leaving Scandinavia, and that raiding was a part of that expansion. The attack on Lindisfarne demonstrated the potential for wealth and resources that could be gained through raiding, which encouraged further Viking expeditions. The attack's brutality and desecration of a holy site had a profound psychological impact on the Anglo-Saxons and the rest of Christian Europe. This raid created a sense of fear and vulnerability, highlighting the threat posed by the Vikings. In essence, the attack on Lindisfarne was a combination of opportunity, wealth, and the emerging Viking desire for expansion and resources. These are the ruins of the actual monastery that we visited in 2016. To clarify, Lindisfarne Castle was not present during the Viking raid of 793. The castle was built much later in the 16th century. The photo to the right shows the causeway out to the island at low tide. If you visit the island, make sure you are aware of the tide times, as you may be stuck there for a while. Sweden became the Eastern Viking raider and trader. Swedish Vikings raided and traded along the river routes. When they met their match in Byzantium and Baghdad, Vikings switched to trading with the more powerful kingdoms. Major trading centers. Novgorod, Kiev, Byzantium, Miklagard. They also used portage routes between main river connections. The Kievan Ruses represents a fascinating and complex chapter in early medieval history, where Viking influence played a significant role in the formation of an East Slavic state. The term Varangians refers to Vikings, primarily from Sweden, who ventured eastward into the territories of what are now Russia, Ukraine, and Belarus. These Norsemen traveled along the river systems, engaging in trade and at times conquest. The origin of the name Rus is debated, but it's widely believed to be linked to these Scandinavian settlers. They established a ruling class and played a crucial role in the political and economic development of the region. According to the primary chronicle, a historical text, the Rus' leader Rurik and his followers established control in Novgorod. Later, Oleg of Novgorod captured Kiev, establishing it as the capital of Kievan Rus. Kievan Rus became a vital trade hub connecting Scandinavia, the Byzantine Empire, and the East. Why did the Vikings explore both to the west and east? I doubt that the only reason was that they were adventurers looking for fame and fortune. Overpopulation, and maybe they were looking for more fertile land, as they may have suffered hunger due to poor soil conditions in Scandinavia. They banished or exiled unruly persons. Eric the Red's father was exiled from Norway, leading the family to Iceland. Eric himself was later exiled from Iceland due to his involvement in manslaughter. As I will discuss further on in this presentation, climate conditions were favorable for exploration. The Scandinavian coastline, and in particular fjord localities and topography, are not conducive to great population expansion. Mostly hard rocks and no land to cultivate and support a larger population. The Vikings were known for their raids across Europe, and the Frankish kingdom, which occupied what is now France, was a frequent target. The region's wealth and vulnerability made it attractive. Over time, these raids transitioned from temporary plundering to more sustained presence. The Seine River provided a crucial waterway for access to the interior of France, making the region strategically significant. Establishing a foothold in this area allowed the Vikings to control trade routes and exert influence. Eventually, a treaty was established between the Frankish king, Charles the Simple, and the Viking leader Rollo. In the year 911, the Treaty of St. Clair sur Epte granted Rollo and his Vikings land in what would become Normandy. This treaty was the pivotal moment. It formalized the Viking settlement and established Rollo as the ruler of the region. As part of the agreement, Rollo converted to Christianity and pledged allegiance to the Frankish king, essentially giving the Vikings land in exchange for peace, and to create a buffer zone against further Viking incursions. Over time, the Vikings who settled in Normandy assimilated with the local Frankish population. They adopted the local language, customs, and religion. This process of assimilation led to the creation of the Norman culture, a unique blend of Viking and Frankish influences. The land granted to Rollo became the Duchy of Normandy. The Normans went on to become a powerful force in the region, and their influence extended far beyond northern France. So in a nutshell, the Viking Norseman evolution saw them transform from raiders to traders to settlers. In the early 8th and 9th centuries, the Vikings arrived in the Shetland Islands looking for land, and for the next 600 years or so, the Norsemen ruled both Orkney and Shetland. Surprisingly, although the Vikings had a reputation as fearsome warriors, they settled down and became farmers. Another small piece of Viking humor, one Viking talking to another. It's a new idea where you plunder them just a little bit on a regular basis. It's called taxation. The Viking bullion economy refers to their system of trade and wealth exchange, which heavily relied on the weight and value of precious metals, primarily silver. Instead of relying on standardized coins with fixed values, the Vikings assessed the worth of goods based on the weight and purity of the silver. This meant that silver, in various forms, served as a primary form of currency. Hack silver was a common form of currency. It consisted of fragmented pieces of silver objects such as jewelry, ingots, or other artifacts. These pieces were weighed on scales to determine their value during transactions. The Vikings' most important trade goods were slaves and furs. Other goods to be traded would include North Sea walrus ivory, Baltic amber, skins, wool, fish, animal fat, wool cloth and clothing, sulfur, falcons, tin, wheat, honey, woolens, silver, barley, linen, wax, honey, silks, fruits, spices, wines, gems, and jewelry. Silver was the dominant metal in the Viking economy. This is evident from the numerous silver hoards discovered throughout Viking Age territories. The influx of silver, particularly from Arab dirhams, significantly impacted the Viking economy. Viking raids and trade expeditions played a crucial role in acquiring silver. Their extensive trade networks reaching from Eastern Europe to the British Isles facilitated the flow of precious metals. The answer to the "did they have their own mines" question was a resounding no. They either stole it or traded for it. Let's look at amber, considered precious by the Vikings. Amber is the fossilized resin of ancient pine trees submerged under the sea in thin veins. Large finds in the Baltic, a treasured material by the Vikings. Other uses for amber, apart from bead making, included pendants, amulets, etc. In the 1970s, archaeologists in Dublin found a Viking settlement spread over several acres, and in it more than 3,000 pieces of amber that were probably imported from Denmark. The map shows where the majority of amber is found. The abundance of amber found in the Baltic region is due to a combination of geological history and biological origins. Millions of years ago, during the Eocene epoch, approximately 50 million years ago, the Baltic region was covered by vast forests. These forests were home to trees that produced significant amounts of resin. This resin, over time, became fossilized, transforming into what we know as amber. Following fossilization, geological processes, including glacial activity and the movement of ancient rivers, played a crucial role in transporting and redepositing the amber. In Norse mythology, amber was sacred to the goddess Freya. She was associated with love, sex, beauty, and fertility. Her magic necklace, Brisingamen, was carved from amber. It was widely used in rituals to encourage passion or fertility. Freya's character exhibits a duality encompassing both gentle, loving qualities and fierce, powerful aspects. This makes her a complex and compelling figure in Norse mythology. Amber was also used in magic for its mystical powers. Amber's properties, its warmth, its scent when burned, and its range of sunny colors led the Vikings to associate it with sunlight and life. Why did the Vikings bury their coins and other artifacts in bogs? Many Vikings hoards have been found buried in bogs, burial mounds, and sometimes buried in longships. The practice of Vikings burying coins and other valuables, sometimes in bogs, stems from a combination of factors, and it's important to understand that there wasn't one single reason. A primary reason was likely simple safekeeping. In a time of frequent raids, warfare, and general instability, burying valuables was a way to protect them. Bogs, while perhaps inconvenient to retrieve from, could serve as effective hiding places. In 2007 in Harrogate, England, a treasure was found worth millions of dollars that one or more Vikings buried around the year 927. It included was 617 coins, 15 of which were dirhams, the basic monetary unit of Morocco, United Arab Emirates, etc. The Viking presence in Iceland is a foundational part of the island's history. The Icelandic age of settlement is generally recognized as occurring between the years 874 and 930. Norse seafarers, primarily from Norway, began to arrive and establish permanent settlements during this time. Ingolfur Arnarson is traditionally considered the first permanent Norse settler in Iceland, arriving around the year 874 and settling in what is now Reykjavik. Early Icelandic society was characterized by independent farms and chieftains. In the year 930, the Althing, one of the world's oldest parliaments, was established at Thingvellir, marking a significant development in Icelandic governance. The Viking heritage remains a strong part of Icelandic identity. Icelandic sagas written in the 13th and 14th centuries provide valuable insights into the lives and stories of the early Viking settlers. The Icelandic language itself is a direct descendant of Old Norse, reflecting the island's Viking origins. The Viking expansion into North America is a fascinating chapter in history, highlighting their remarkable seafaring abilities. They established settlements in Greenland in the late 10th century, which served as a launching point for further exploration westward. Around the year 1000, Leif Erikson led expeditions that reached the shores of North America. The Icelandic sagas describe these voyages, mentioning lands like Helluland, likely Baffin Island, Markland, likely Labradusme, and Vinland, likely Newfoundland. Archaeological evidence at Lasso Meadows in Newfoundland confirms the presence of a Norse settlement. This site provides tangible proof of Viking activity in North America. This site indicates that the Vikings did indeed make it to North America, and that the sagas had some factual basis. The settlements were more than likely used as temporary base camps for the exploitation of resources. In essence, the Vikings were the first Europeans known to have reached North America centuries before Christopher Columbus. However, their presence was relatively brief and did not lead to sustained colonization. The Valsey Norse settlement in Greenland is a significant historical site, particularly known for its well-preserved church ruins. Valsey, meaning Whale Island, is located near Qaqortoq in southern Greenland. It was part of the Eastern Settlement, one of the two major Norse settlements in Greenland. The site is notable for having some of the best preserved Norse ruins in Greenland, with the Valsey Church being a prominent feature. We believe it was constructed in the 14th century. The eventual disappearance of the Norse settlements in Greenland, including Valsey, remains a topic of historical debate, with factors like climate change, environmental degradation, and changing trade patterns being considered. Valsey is part of the Kujata Greenland site, which was inscribed on the UNESCO World Heritage List in 2017. This recognition highlights the site's cultural and historical importance. The ruins at Valsey provide valuable insights into the lives of the Norse settlers in Greenland, their architecture, and their adaptation to the harsh environment. Newfoundland in Canada is home to Lasso Meadows, an incredibly significant archaeological site that provides concrete evidence of Viking presence in North America around the year 1000. It's the only confirmed Norse settlement in North America, predating Christopher Columbus's arrival by centuries. This site demonstrates that Vikings reached North America, supporting the narratives found in the Icelandic sagas. The site contains the remains of 8 Norse buildings constructed with timber frames and turf walls, typical of Norse architecture in Greenland and Iceland. Artifacts found at the site indicate various activities including ironworking, woodworking, and everyday life. The presence of artifacts like a spindle whorl suggests that women were also part of the settlement. Norsemen harvested and smelted bog iron to use as the raw material for the iron rivets to repair their ships there 1,000 years ago. Where streams run from nearby mountains through a peat bog, bog iron can almost always be found. That combination was probably visible to Norse explorers even from on board their ships in the cove at Lance aux Meadows. The site was discovered in the 1960s by Helga and Anne Stein Ingstad. It's a UNESCO World Heritage Site, recognizing its global historical importance. The site gives us a glimpse into the Vikings' ability to travel vast ocean distances. It is believed that the settlement was occupied for a relatively short period of time. Lance aux Meadows provides invaluable insights into the Viking Age and their exploration of new lands. It reshaped our understanding of early European contact with North America. Food remains included butternuts, which are significant because they do not grow naturally north of New Brunswick. The nuts' presence probably indicates the Norse inhabitants traveled farther south to obtain them, or the climate was warmer. There was a recent find of a Norse settlement in Point Rosie in Newfoundland, Canada. The story of Point Rosie is a fascinating example of how archaeological investigations can unfold, with initial excitement followed by more conclusive findings. In 2014, archaeologist Sarah Parkak, using satellite imagery, identified potential features at Point Rosie in Newfoundland that suggested a possible Norse settlement. These features resembled the layout of Norse longhouses, sparking considerable interest. Subsequent archaeological excavations in 2015 and 2016 aimed to confirm the presence of a Norse site. However, after thorough investigation, the researchers concluded that there was no evidence whatsoever for either a Norse presence or human activity at Point Rosie prior to the historic period. Could changes in climate have expanded the Viking horizon to the west? Viking explorer Thorbarb returns home after discovering Texas. The medieval warm period, also sometimes called the medieval climate anomaly, was a period of unusually warm climate that occurred roughly between the years 900 and 1300. While the MWP is associated with warmer temperatures, particularly in the North Atlantic region, it's important to note that climate variations were not uniform across the globe. Some regions experience warmer conditions, while others may have experienced different climate patterns. The MWP facilitated Viking exploration and settlement in regions like Greenland. The Little Ice Age was a period of regional cooling, particularly pronounced in the North Atlantic region, that occurred roughly from the early 14th century through the mid-19th century. It wasn't a true global ice age, but rather a period of significant climatic downturn. The effects of the LIA were not uniform across the globe. The North Atlantic region, including Europe, experienced the most significant cooling. Other areas saw varying degrees of temperature changes and altered weather patterns. During the medieval warming period, we had Viking settlements in Iceland in the years 874 to 930 in Greenland during 986, and again in Newfoundland, Canada during 986. Historical records, including the Domesday Book in the year 1086, document the existence of numerous vineyards across southern England. Areas around London, such as Westminster and Holborn, were particularly known for their vineyards. The warmer temperatures extended the growing season, allowing for increased yields of staple crops like wheat, barley, rye, and oats. This led to a surplus of food in some areas, which contributed to population growth. It was during this time that we see the majority of the major cathedrals in England being built. Crops of corn, barley, and wheat were growing in Iceland and northern Norway above the Arctic Circle during the medieval warm period, the area pointed to by the red arrow. There were vineyards and wineries in North Europe during the medieval warming period. Wine was produced from 1128 to 1437 in East Prussia. Grapes grew in Lithuania, southern Norway, as well as southern England. One of the most significant changes was the northward expansion of vineyards. Wine grapes were grown further north than is generally feasible today. Specifically, there's evidence that vineyards existed in England at latitudes where grape cultivation is now very limited. This indicates warmer temperatures during that period. In regions where viticulture was already established, such as in parts of Germany, vineyards were cultivated at higher altitudes than they are today. This also points to warmer average temperatures. This graphic shows the location of medieval Viking settlements abandoned during the years 1300 to 1400 at the beginning of the Little Ice Age. During the years 800 to 1200, Icelandic farms that grew barley and oats were totally abandoned by 1400 due to encroaching glaciers and colder weather. The frost fair of the years 1683 to 1684, occurring during the Great Frost of that period, stands out as one of the most remarkable of the River Thames frost fairs. That winter was exceptionally severe, with the River Thames freezing solid for a prolonged period, roughly 2 months. This extreme cold was part of the broader Little Ice Age, a period of colder temperatures. Wheat prices spike at the same time as solar activity during the Little Ice Age. The Maunder minimum was a period of significantly reduced sunspot activity that occurred approximately between the years 1645 and 1715. It's a key event in solar physics, and its impact on Earth's climate is still a subject of scientific study. William Herschel, astronomer, and Adam Smith, classical economist. Both recognized the relationship between commodity prices of wheat and grain and solar activity. Another 19th century economist, William Stanley Jevons, proposed a theory that solar activity, specifically the 11-year sunspot cycle, influenced agricultural output and thus commodity prices. He argued that variations in solar activity affected weather patterns, leading to fluctuations in crop yields and subsequently prices. Imagine you are a Viking and you've just settled on a strange island, hoping to find happiness there. One day, when you're out wandering about your new country, the ground starts to shake. Deep rumbling sounds from the core of the earth drown out any other noise. Suddenly, the top of the nearest mountain explodes, and an inferno of glowing stones and ashes shoot out of the shattered mountaintop and plummet in all directions, while columns of fire, the height of the Empire State Building, shoot out from the explosion. Because you're living hundreds of years prior to the emergence of science, there is no natural explanation to what you just saw. What would you think, and what would you tell your friends? In the year 934, Iceland was struck by one of the greatest volcanic eruptions in recent history. It happened just a few years after the Vikings colonized the island. As the Vikings originally came from areas without volcanoes, they had no idea what was happening when the Katla volcano erupted. That concludes my presentation, so let's finish on a comical note. Thank you for watching, and we hope you enjoyed this presentation on the Vikings. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel by pressing the subscribe button below. We are planning to add many more presentations covering a wide variety of science, history, and other enriching subjects. If you have any comments, questions, or suggestions, please feel free to make them, and we will do our best to respond. Again, thanks for watching, and please do subscribe.